Hi there. Now, if you want to grow your agency consistently, one of the cornerstones to making that happen is that you retain the clients that you win. And one of the single biggest factors that will determine how many clients you keep and for how long is how well you communicate with them. So whoever in your agency is doing your communications with your clients, whether it's you as a business owner, whether it's an account manager or somebody else, you need to be 100% sure that that person can speak with authority and come across well with your clients and sound like a pro, sound like an expert and not an amateur. Because that perception that your client gets of your agency and your business based on those communications will go a huge way to determining retention. And without retention, we can't grow. So let's have a look at how we actually sound like an authority, like an expert, and we position our client communications for success. So first thing to say is we have to have good client communication, but we have to have the right kind of communication. And when I say right, what do I mean? It needs to be timely. We need to be communicating with our clients in the right way, so maybe email, maybe phone, maybe a chat somehow, at the right time it's appropriate to the message, and the right frequency for the message. We need to do it with authority, and we're going to dig more into what that means in a few minutes. We need to be technically competent. We need to know the language. It's important that we understand our subject matter in the same way as you wouldn't expect to deal with somebody trying to sell you a car who's never seen it before. You wouldn't expect to communicate with an account manager who doesn't know what Google AdWords is, for example. And something that often gets forgotten is while we can be technical experts, while we can be authoritative, we need empathy for the business owner. All the technical stuff doesn't matter if the business owner doesn't feel the outcomes that you're generating. They need to feel the change in their business as a result of the work that's been done for them. So empathy and understanding and appreciation of their circumstances goes a huge long way. So let's dig a little bit more now into how to sound like an expert and how to be an authority and boost your client retention as a result. Number one, the most important thing we can do is at the outset, before we even sign the client up, make sure that we've got good, clear, understandable goals that you can agree with, that the client agrees with, and that your white label service provider agrees with. We need to make sure we're all on the same page to achieve the same objective. If we don't have a clear outcome in mind, then we'll never know if we, as an agency owners, have delivered the thing that we sold. And that's just a recipe for a poor experience for everybody. So the best way to start by being an expert is to make sure you've agreed that goal. A pro has a goal, a pro has an objective, an amateur just has a go. Don't be the amateur just having a go. Now, once we know what the goal is, let's make sure that we know who is responsible for what. Make sure you are very clear with your client what's your responsibility, some of which you may be passing to your white label service provider, and what's their responsibility. Again, we don't want to have a discussion 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 10 weeks down the track where you thought the client was responsible for something, they were expecting you to do it, and now they're not happy. That expert positioning starts with set the goal, agree who's responsible, what elements of delivering it, and then we worry about delivering it. So it's really important we get that right. Make sure when we're setting these goals and we're agreeing responsibilities, we understand the language that we're talking. If you're going to talk about an AdWords campaign or a Facebook campaign, you need to make sure you know what a CPC, a cost per click, is. You know what an impression is. You know the difference between an impression and an impression share. You don't need to be an expert, but you need to know the language. If you don't know the language, you can't possibly set a clear goal and you can't set accountabilities. So the language is important, and it's really easy to pick up. Go to any any website, go to Google AdWords, for example, there are plenty of resources where in relatively short amounts of time you can gain a good degree of language that you need to sound like the pro. Next, agree a communications schedule. I said your communication needs to be timely. The best way to make sure it's timely and make sure it meets your client's expectations is to set those expectations. Create a communication schedule that's appropriate for where you are in their relationship with them. If it's a new account and a new campaign, communication is going to be fairly frequent, maybe every few days, every week, something like that for the first month or two, and it will probably become less frequent as time goes on. But make sure that there is a schedule in place. You set the schedule, you set the pace, you set the client's expectations. Because if you don't set those, the client will create their own. And if they create their own and they don't tell you that, what they expect and what you deliver might not be the same, your client will be disappointed. An expert knows an appropriate communication schedule and sets it up accordingly. So part of your positioning is to future pace those communications because you know what works, you know what's appropriate, you know what's timely. Also, make sure within that communication schedule you go through the PPC campaign performance reports with them. Make sure you are very clearly demonstrating what you are delivering for them. Make sure they understand it. If they don't understand the report, they can't possibly associate it with the value you're delivering for them. So it's your responsibility in your authority position to make sure that the important items on that report are clearly understood by your client, because that's part of the value you deliver to their business. And if you need help with that, if you're not clear, use your white label service provider. Make sure that they have run through it with you ahead of your call with the client so that you understand it, you know what's important, you know what's not important, you know what the issues are, you know what the wins and the successes are, because we need to be able to communicate those effectively for retention. But that said, understand and accept it's okay not to know everything. You do not have to know every answer to every question that your client might ask. Don't ever put off making a client call because you're concerned they will ask a question that you don't know the answer to. That's how relationships and retention dies. If you don't communicate, the client assumes you don't care. The best thing to do is have your schedule, stick to it, be as effective as you can, and if a client asks you a detailed technical question you just don't know the answer, say, I don't know that, I'm the relationship guy, I'm here to communicate with you, I'm not the person turning the wheels of the campaign as you would expect to have a back office team that do that for me. I will check in with them, I will get that answer from them because they're the experts, and I'll come back to you with it later. It's perfectly okay not to know. And finally, make sure you communicate regularly. Good news or bad. One thing that we see as a white label service provider sometimes is if there is adversity, if there is bad news, an agency might choose to hide that, choose not to communicate, and it will always come back and cause future pain. It's super, super important that whether it's good news or bad news, and 9 times out of 10 it'll be good news, you communicate both with equal vigour and equal consistency, and it will come back and it will pay dividends in just how long you retain some super happy client relationships.